They say betrayal doesn't knock, it crash through the front door when you least expect it, tearing down everything you thought was solid. That's exactly what happened to Rachel Miller. And if you think this is just another tale of infidelity, think again. Because what Rachel walked into wasn't just a broken marriage. It was a war, and like any war, it started with silence. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day that passes without ceremony. Rachel had just picked up groceries and was driving past her husband's workplace on North State Street in downtown Chicago. She wasn't planning on stopping, just wanted to wave if she caught a glimpse of Daniel. He'd always texted her sweet things when she passed by, "Wave at my window, love," but today, fate had different plans. At the corner near the tech building where Daniel worked, Rachel spotted him outside. She slowed down, her heart skipped. There he was, her husband of 10 years, the father of her 2 children, standing near the glass lobby. But she wasn't the only one who noticed him. A woman, tall, brunette, polished, walked straight up to Daniel. Without hesitation, she wrapped her arms around him and kissed him, not a peck, a kiss that said, "You're mine." And Daniel didn't pull away, he kissed her back. It took Rachel a full 10 seconds to register what she'd just witnessed. The red light turned green, cars honked, but she couldn't move. Her breath caught in her chest, her hands numb around the steering wheel. The woman got into Daniel's car, and they drove away like it was the most natural thing in the world. Rachel sat frozen in traffic, a bag of groceries on the passenger seat and 1,000 questions crashing through her mind. How long? Who was she? Why hadn't she seen the signs? But above all, how do you go home to the same man after watching him kiss someone else like you never existed? That night, Rachel tucked their 4-year-old son, Noah, into bed. Upstairs, their daughter Emma was reading Harry Potter, his same book series Rachel had introduced her to years ago. Meanwhile, Daniel came home around 9 p.m., smelling like aftershave and betrayal. "Hey, love," he said, leaning in to kiss her cheek as he always did. Rachel turned away. "What's wrong?" Daniel asked, confused. "Is there something you'd like to tell me?" she asked, her voice quiet but razor sharp. Daniel blinked. "Like what?" "I saw you today, outside your office, with her. The woman in heels and the perfect hair. You kissed her, Daniel. You held her like she was your wife." Silence, long enough to feel like eternity. Finally, he sighed. "Her name is Madison. She's a colleague, and yes, we're involved." Rachel didn't scream, she didn't throw anything. She simply stood there, her spine straight and her voice trembling. "Are you seriously suggesting we pretend this never happened?" Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "I don't want to lose you or the kids. I want to keep things as they are. She's just what?" Rachel cut him off. "A hobby, a second home, a new beginning without the mess of responsibility." "I'm not giving you a divorce," he snapped. "The kids need stability, a complete family." "No," Rachel said, eyes now shimmering with unshed tears. "They need a safe family, not one built on lies." That night, they slept in separate rooms for the first time. No shouting, no slamming doors, just the eerie silence of something sacred slowly dying. The next morning, Daniel left before sunrise. No note, no explanation, just absence. And in that void, Rachel faced the terrifying truth. Her marriage was over. But what frightened her more wasn't the end, it was what came next. Where would she go? How would she support the kids alone? Would the world see her as a failure, just another discarded woman with 2 kids and a broken heart? And the most terrifying question of all, was she still enough without him? You see, when betrayal happens, it doesn't just ruin a relationship, it shakes the very foundation of identity. Rachel had built her life around Daniel, his dreams, his career, his needs. While he climbed the corporate ladder, she raised their children, worked freelance to fill the gaps, and kept the house running like clockwork. She gave up promotions, friendships, time for a man who now said, "She's just someone I'm involved with." But this story isn't about Rachel's downfall, it's about her resurrection. Before we get to that, if this story is gripping your heart even just a little, I ask you to subscribe to the channel. Stories like Rachel's aren't rare, but the strength it takes to rise from them, that's what we're here to celebrate. Your support helps us share more real, powerful narratives that remind people you're not alone. Now, I'll leave you with a question to think about. If you caught your partner cheating and they refused to leave, what would you do? Stay silent, wait, and endure it for the sake of the children. B. Stand up, walk away, and fight for your dignity. Type will be in the comments. I'm curious what choice you would make. And don't forget to subscribe, we're just getting started. By the time Rachel closed the front door behind her, the walls no longer felt like home. The house that once held lullabies and Sunday pancakes had turned into a battlefield. Every photograph on the wall, every toy underfoot, every scent of him in the sheets was a reminder of what she had lost. But this wasn't just about heartbreak, this was about survival. She knew she couldn't stay. Daniel had made it clear he wasn't going to leave, and Madison, the woman who was now visibly pregnant, had begun to make herself comfortable in what had been Rachel's kitchen, sipping tea from her mugs, sitting in her chair, speaking as if the house belonged to her. That morning, after overhearing Madison talking about decorating the nursery, Rachel had had enough. She told Emma and Noah to pack their favorite things, trying to keep her voice calm despite the chaos swirling inside her. Emma, just 9, clutched her stuffed cat and asked, "Mom, why do we have to go?" "What did I do wrong?" Rachel knelt beside her daughter, brushing the hair from her face. "You didn't do anything wrong, sweetheart. We just need to go somewhere where we can breathe a little better, somewhere that's ours." They left quietly, no shouting, no scene. She took her laptop, a few clothes, documents, the kids, and her courage. She didn't look back. For the next few hours, Rachel drove through the city like a ghost, trying to find a place that didn't feel like exile. She scrolled through rental listings, making calls from the driver's seat while the kids napped in the back. Finally, she found a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Evanston. The landlord, sensing her urgency, agreed to meet that evening. The place wasn't much, but it had clean walls, working locks, and no memories. It had the makings of a fresh start. That night, after putting the kids to bed on makeshift mattresses, Rachel sat alone at the kitchen table, her fingers trembling as she opened her laptop. She had no idea where to begin. She had no plan, only a truth burning inside her. She would not allow Daniel to take away her children, her home, and her dignity without a fight. She searched for family lawyers in the area and narrowed her choices down to one name that kept appearing in articles and client reviews: Jonathan Carter, a former prosecutor turned family advocate, known for his integrity and, more importantly, for not losing custody battles. She called the next morning and was surprised when he answered himself. Her voice cracked as she introduced herself. "I need help. My husband's trying to take everything." Jonathan didn't hesitate. "Let's meet this afternoon. Bring anything you have: texts, financials, timelines. And if you have the kids with you, that's fine too." They met at a small cafe with a play area, the kind of place built for broken families trying to act normal. Rachel laid it all out: the affair, the threats, the power imbalance. Daniel made good money as a department head in a major tech firm. He had connections, confidence, and a plan. Rachel had nothing but the truth. Jonathan listened, scribbled notes, nodded occasionally. But when she showed him a recent bank transfer, an unusually large one from Daniel's account to a shell corporation, he paused. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. She shook her head. Jonathan leaned back. "I've seen transfers like this before. He's hiding assets, possibly even doing something illegal at work. Would you be comfortable if I looked into that?" Rachel hesitated only briefly. "If he's going to take me to war, then I need every defense I can get." In the weeks that followed, the quiet apartment in Evanston became a war room. Rachel balanced part-time translation projects and motherhood with meetings, affidavits, and legal prep. Jonathan, true to reputation, took the case personally. He contacted a friend at Daniel's company, a department head in a neighboring team, who agreed to talk off the record. What they learned changed everything. Daniel wasn't just unfaithful, he was dangerous. He had been leaking confidential company information to a competitor: emails, source code, development timelines. No one had been able to prove it until now. Jonathan knew this could be their leverage. It wasn't just about winning custody anymore. It was about protecting the kids from a man who played by no rules. But while Rachel worked tirelessly to protect her children's future, Daniel used every tactic to maintain control. He filed a counter-petition in court demanding full custody, accusing Rachel of being unstable and financially incapable. He had money, influence, and a narrative. She had resilience. She cried often but never in front of the children. She was their constant, now the one who made breakfast, checked homework, told bedtime stories. She kept the chaos outside the door. Then came the day Daniel crossed a line even she hadn't expected. He arrived at the courthouse not just with his lawyer but with Madison, her belly round, her smile smug. It was a move designed to humiliate. Rachel stood tall. That day, the judge didn't make a ruling yet. But he did acknowledge that the situation was sensitive and in flux. Jonathan requested a formal investigation into Daniel's finances and background. The judge approved. Outside the courtroom, Madison had the nerve to say, "Soon, I'll be Mrs. Miller. You can stop pretending this family is yours." Rachel didn't respond. She didn't need to. Because she knew now what she hadn't known weeks earlier. This wasn't the end of her story. It was the turning point. She was no longer running. She was fighting back. And this time, she wasn't alone. Let me tell you something I've learned over the years watching marriages unravel and rebuild. It's not always the loudest cry for help that wins the battle. It's the steady, quiet fight of the one who refuses to be erased. Rachel Miller was learning to roar in silence, and the storm was far from over. The courtroom isn't just a place of law, it's a theatre of truth and consequence. And in Rachel Miller's case, it was the final battleground where a woman who had been silent for far too long would finally be heard. She sat near the front, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, the scent of old wood and formality thick in the air. To anyone looking from the outside, she might have seemed composed. But inside, Rachel was waging her own war. Fear, fury, grief, and an unfamiliar determination boiling under her skin. Across the aisle sat Daniel, her soon-to-be ex-husband. Immaculate in his suit, eyes cold, lips tight. And beside him, Madison, his mistress, now 8 months pregnant, her hand draped possessively over his arm, as if marking territory. The sight alone should have been enough to crush Rachel. Once, that had been her place, her family, her home. But the woman sitting here today was not the same person who'd once whispered forever at the altar. Rachel had changed, and she had come prepared. The case today was simple on paper: custody and division of assets. But beneath that paperwork lived years of sacrifice, betrayal, and the quiet labor of motherhood. While Daniel had chased promotions, Rachel had changed diapers, wiped tears, worked nights as a translator, and anchored the lives of 2 children who saw her not as a placeholder but as their world. Her attorney, Jonathan Carter, stood beside her, calm, steady, and unlike most lawyers I've seen in this business, he cared. Not in a performative way, but in that rare, personal way that made him sit with clients after hours, review emails at midnight, and fight like hell because he knew what was at stake. The judge called the session to order. Both parties were asked to present their claims. Daniel's team went first. Their argument was as cold as it was calculated. Daniel had provided financially for years. The house and both cars were under his name. Rachel had limited earning capacity and was emotionally reactive, and therefore not a stable guardian. It was a familiar tactic: reduce the woman to her bank statements, weaponize her emotions, question her competence for daring to feel. But Jonathan rose with quiet confidence. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't posture. He simply told the court the truth, that Rachel had been the primary caregiver, the emotional backbone of the family. That she worked from home so she could raise their children. That Daniel's sudden demand for full custody had nothing to do with the kids and everything to do with control. And then came the moment no one expected. "Your Honor," Jonathan said, "we request permission to call a surprise witness. Someone with relevant information regarding Mr. Miller's conduct, both personal and professional." The judge hesitated, then nodded, "Proceed." When the courtroom door opened and Ashley Chen stepped in, a ripple of silence followed. Ashley was Daniel's former colleague, his CEO's executive assistant, and her presence alone made Daniel stiffen. Rachel watched the color drain from his face. Ashley took the stand, sworn in, and began to speak calmly, clearly. I'm here today because I witnessed Mr. Miller engage in activities that violated company policy and likely the law. Specifically, the unauthorized sharing of internal data with a competing firm. The judge leaned forward. Can you clarify what kind of data? Product development plans, timelines, strategic proposals, Ashley said. Documents that were confidential and traceable to Mr. Miller's credentials. A murmur rose in the room. The judge called for order. Daniel's lawyer protested, claiming irrelevance, but Jonathan pressed on. This speaks directly to Mr. Miller's character and credibility. If he betrayed his employer, how can we trust his testimony about his role in the family or his intentions with the children? Rachel didn't flinch. She already knew the answer. She'd lived it. When the CEO of Daniel's company stood to corroborate the breach, Daniel exploded. He shouted denials, called Ashley a liar. The judge slammed his gavel and ordered Daniel removed from the courtroom. He left cursing, red-faced, flanked by security guards. Madison followed shortly after, her expression crumbling. What remained in the room was something far more powerful than legal strategy. It was the truth, spoken aloud, finally unmasked. Later, when the judge recessed to consider his ruling, Rachel sat alone at the bench, her breath shaky, her eyes locked on the floor. Jonathan returned and gently tapped her shoulder. You did everything right, he said. Now we wait. When the judge returned, his voice was measured, but the verdict rang like a church bell through Rachel's soul. Given the circumstances presented, it is this court's decision that primary custody of the children, Emma and Noah Miller, will be awarded to their mother, Rachel Miller. Mr. Miller will retain visitation rights to be scheduled in coordination with Ms. Miller. As for the house, the judge added, this court deems it marital property. It shall be either sold and divided evenly, or one party shall buy out the other's share. Rachel didn't cry, not then, not in that moment. She simply nodded, as if taking in the weight of what had been returned to her, not a house, not assets, but agency. A voice, a future. As they walked out of the courthouse, the sky over Chicago was unusually clear. The kind of blue you only notice after weeks of storm. Jonathan turned to her, slipping his file into his briefcase. You were never the weak one, Rachel. You were just quiet. Until now. And sometimes, that's all it takes, a voice, a truth. And someone brave enough to stand alone until the law, the world, or just one person finally listens. Healing doesn't happen all at once. It sneaks in quietly like the sun after a long storm, barely noticeable at first, but warm enough to make you stop and breathe. For Rachel Miller, healing didn't look like joy. Not yet. It looked like stillness, like survival. And in that stillness, something unexpected began to grow, the possibility of new love. Jonathan Carter, her lawyer, hadn't just been her advocate in the courtroom. Over the months, he'd become something of a lifeline, someone who listened when she spoke, who understood the fear beneath her composure. Their connection hadn't started with flirtation. It began with the unglamorous business of rebuilding. A shared table at the local diner after long legal meetings. A quick call to check on the kids when she missed an appointment. A steady presence on the days when she felt like she was unraveling. One afternoon, after finalizing the details of her property settlement, Rachel brought lunch to the hospital where Jonathan had been recovering from an injury. Daniel had attacked him outside his apartment in a fit of rage weeks earlier, a last desperate act of a man who had lost everything. The assault left Jonathan with a head injury and several broken ribs. But what shook Rachel more was the thought that someone had stood between her and the worst parts of her past and paid for it. He looked pale when she walked in, propped up by pillows, but smiled the moment he saw her. You brought sandwiches, he said, like it was the most romantic thing in the world. You need real food, she replied, setting the bag on the side table. Hospital meals are barely meals. As they ate in silence, something shifted between them. There were no grand confessions, no whispered promises. Just the slow, undeniable realization that this was comfort, this was ease. It was the first time in years Rachel felt safe sitting beside a man not guarded, not self-conscious, not rehearsing every word in her head. When Jonathan was discharged, Rachel insisted on helping him for a few days while he recovered. She brought over groceries, checked on his prescriptions, and without meaning to became part of his daily life. He, in turn, became part of hers. Her children, Emma and Noah, took to him quickly. He had a gentle way with them. Like he understood the fine line between stepping in and overstepping. He never tried to be their father. He just showed up helping Emma with her math homework, assembling a broken toy for Noah, listening, laughing, and staying through the quiet moments too. One night, after the kids had gone to bed, they stood in the kitchen washing dishes together. Rachel passed him a towel without thinking. He took it, drying the plates, then paused. "You ever think about starting over?" he asked. Rachel looked at him. Every day, he didn't say more, he didn't need to. The moment held everything that words couldn't. That week, Rachel invited him to stay for dinner more often. Eventually, dinner turned into weekends. And weekends turned into conversations about what a new kind of family might look like. One without secrets, without fear, without the looming shadow of who had left. It took months for Rachel to accept that she was allowed to love again. That what she had with Daniel wasn't the end of her capacity for connection, it was just a lesson. A necessary heartbreak to clear space for something deeper. Real love, she realized, doesn't demand, it doesn't twist or threaten. It holds space for you to breathe, even when you're a mess, especially when you're a mess. One evening, after putting Noah to bed, Rachel walked into the living room and found Jonathan asleep on the couch, Emma curled up beside him, both of them holding books. The television played quietly in the background. She stood there for a long time, watching them. That was the moment it hit her, not like a spark, but a wave. She loved him. Not with the desperate ache of someone needing to be saved, but with the quiet certainty of someone who had saved herself, and was now choosing someone who matched her peace. A week later, she asked him, "What would you think about living here, not just visiting, not just helping? Really living here, with us?" Jonathan blinked. "Are you sure?" Rachel nodded. "I don't want a replacement for the past. I want someone for the future. And I think that's you." He moved in that month. Not as a rescuer, not as a placeholder, but as a partner. They divided housework. He handled bedtime stories when she was on deadline. She handled groceries and bills. They were a team not because life had forced them together, but because they chose each other. Together, they found a new apartment with more light, a backyard, and a treehouse in the making. The kids chose their own rooms. Rachel painted the kitchen yellow. Jonathan installed a coffee shelf, joking that domesticity looked good on him. Their life wasn't perfect. There were still hard days. The memories of her former life didn't vanish overnight. But now, when she woke up in the middle of the night, she didn't lie awake wondering what she'd done wrong. She reached over and felt Jonathan beside her, breathing, steady, there, and that made all the difference. In love and marriage, people often ask, "How do you know when it's right?" The truth is, it doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes with quiet, with calm, with the absence of fear. Rachel didn't just find love again, she found herself, and that was the real beginning. Closure doesn't always come with a grand finale. Sometimes, it's not a slammed door or a shouted goodbye, it's quieter than that. It's when you wake up one morning and realize you're no longer haunted by the questions that used to keep you up at night. It's when the name of someone who broke you no longer stings. For Rachel Miller, closure came in waves. Not all at once, but gradually, over days and months where life was no longer about surviving but simply living. The legal papers had long been signed, the court orders filed away. Daniel had moved out of state with Madison, and Rachel hadn't heard from him since. The children still received the occasional birthday card, an awkward, obligatory gesture with generic wishes scribbled in unfamiliar handwriting. But they no longer asked about him, and Rachel had stopped wondering whether he would ever show up as the father he once promised to be. Instead, Rachel had poured her energy into something far more sacred, building a life rooted in peace. Her mornings began not with panic or fear, but with the scent of fresh coffee, sunlight spilling over the kitchen counter, and the quiet hum of a house at ease. She had reclaimed her career, now running her own small but thriving language services agency. Her clients respected her, her employees trusted her, and for the first time in years she respected herself. She had learned to make room for joy without feeling guilty. She laughed again, the kind of laughter that rose from deep inside her chest, unfiltered and full. Her weekends were spent at soccer games and dance recitals, community barbecues and quiet evenings with Jonathan, the man who had loved her not for who she once was, but for who she was becoming. One rainy afternoon, as Rachel stood by the window watching the kids chase each other through puddles in the backyard, a thought came to her with startling clarity. She had made it. Not because she had found a new relationship or financial stability, but because she had finally forgiven herself for staying too long, for doubting her instincts, for carrying shame that was never hers to bear. Closure isn't about erasing the past, it's about learning to live alongside it. Rachel still carried the scars, but they no longer dictated the pace of her days. They were reminders not of weakness, but of survival. Of all the versions of herself she had outgrown, shed, and buried along the way. There was one moment, however, when the past did knock on her door, literally. It was a Saturday morning when Daniel showed up. Not unannounced, but certainly uninvited. He stood on her porch, thinner, disheveled, holding a bouquet of flowers he didn't quite know what to do with. Rachel didn't open the door right away. She stood behind the screen, heart-pounding, watching him through the thin mesh. And he stood there, silent, his eyes sunken with regret she had no obligation to carry. "I don't want to make things worse," he said finally. "I just ... I wanted to say I'm sorry." She nodded, okay. He waited, as if hoping for more, but Rachel had no words left for him, not cruel, not kind. There was nothing owed, nothing unsaid, and that was the most powerful realization of all. "I hope you're well," she added, gently but firmly. Then she closed the door. That was the last time she saw him. In the weeks that followed, Rachel didn't dwell on the encounter. She didn't replay the moment or dig for meanings. It was simply another chapter closed. A weight laid down, her focus remained forward. Emma's 10th birthday arrived with a backyard party filled with balloons, homemade cake, and a handmade necklace from Jonathan that made her squeal with delight. Noah scored his first goal in a soccer match and ran straight into Rachel's arms like he had just won the World Cup. And in the quiet moments, after the kids had gone to bed, Rachel and Jonathan would sit on the couch in shared silence, fingers entwined, the comfort of each other's presence stronger than words. One evening, as they watched an old film playing softly in the background, Jonathan turned to her. "Do you ever miss the woman you used to be?" Rachel thought for a moment, then shook her head. "No, I think she served her purpose. She got me here. But I don't want to be her again." He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You're right, she was brave. But the woman sitting here now, she's whole." Rachel didn't cry. She didn't need to. Wholeness doesn't always look like triumph. Sometimes it's just the absence of pain, the quiet presence of peace. And in that moment, she felt it in every part of her body. Moving forward doesn't mean forgetting. It means no longer letting the pain of the past steal the light from the present. Rachel had spent years mourning the life she thought she was supposed to have, but now she was living the one she had chosen, a life not without challenges, but rich in love, strength, and meaning, and that, above all, was her closure. Not a moment, not a line in a court order, but a life rebuilt, not in spite of the ruins but because of them. In the aftermath of Rachel Miller's emotional odyssey, one truth stands above all else. Sometimes, the most profound victories in life are quiet. They don't arrive with applause or accolades, but with peace earned, not given. Her journey is not just about divorce or betrayal, it's about reclamation. About the painstaking process of gathering the shattered pieces of one's identity and creating something stronger, wiser, and more beautiful than what existed before. Rachel's story reminds us that healing is never linear. It's filled with contradictions, moments of strength wrapped in vulnerability, joy tainted by memory, freedom laced with fear, and yet, despite the messiness, healing is possible. Not because time erases pain, but because courage insists on growth, even in its presence. Too often, we measure our worth by how much we can endure, how long we can stay silent, how well we can perform a perfect life. Rachel did all of that, and for years, she lived a life that looked acceptable on the outside but hollowed her from within. It wasn't until she gave herself permission to break that she began to rebuild authentically. The decision to walk away from something broken isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's understanding that love cannot thrive in manipulation, and that loyalty should never be used as a leash. Rachel chose to value her dignity, her peace, and the future of her children more than the illusion of a family built on fear. And yet, Rachel didn't become hardened or bitter. That's perhaps the most beautiful part of her transformation. She remained soft enough to love again, to trust, to allow another man into her children's lives and her own heart. That takes unimaginable strength, the kind that doesn't scream, but simply endures and opens anyway. Her story speaks to countless men and women who have been made to believe they must accept less than they deserve. It whispers to those who sit quietly at night, wondering if they're going crazy, or if the life they're living is slowly suffocating their spirit. To them, Rachel's journey is a lighthouse. A reminder that it's not too late to start over, that the past doesn't define the future. That scars are not signs of failure but proof of survival. The deeper lesson here: you are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become after. So how do we apply this to our own lives? First, we must learn to listen to our inner voice, the one that often whispers before it screams. When something feels wrong, it usually is. Don't ignore that feeling, trust it. Second, cultivate the courage to walk away from things that diminish you, even when it's hard, even when others don't understand. Lastly, believe in your capacity to rebuild. Surround yourself with people who honor your growth, who celebrate your healing, not those who punish your boundaries. Life is messy, unpredictable, and at times unbearably painful. But it's also full of second chances, of unexpected kindness, of quiet evenings where laughter returns, love finds a way back in, and you finally exhale after holding your breath for too long. Now, I want to hear from you. Here's a simple reflection to think about. If you had to choose, which would you value more in a relationship? A loyalty, even if it comes with pain. B, peace, even if it means starting over. Comment your answer below with or B, and feel free to share why. Your insights could be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel so we can keep bringing you real, meaningful stories that matter. If you feel moved to support our work, even a small donation helps more than you know. I'm just an old storyteller trying to leave something good behind before I go. Your encouragement through your words, your likes, your shares, or your support keeps this journey alive. Thank you for listening, for caring, and for being part of this space. Let's keep building something beautiful together.